Buongiorno a tutti e benvenuti.
Let's start our conference. Welcome, good afternoon to you all. We're here today to meet two representatives from the Slow Food Network in Ukraine. We've called this meeting Together for Slow Food Communities in Ukraine, which is also the name we've given, a very simple name we've given to a slow food campaign, a campaign gathering campaign with the purpose of supporting our communities in Ukraine. Let me introduce the panel. First of all, Katerina Tarasenko, who's a goat farmer and a cheesemaker from Transcarpathia, obviously in Ukraine. Then Yulia Pitenko, who is the coordinator of the Slow Food Network in Ukraine. Marta Messa, who is Slow Food Secretary General of the International Slow Food Association, in fact, the foundation, Slow Food Foundation, that's what we must call it now. And lastly, Marcello Longo, who is the president of Slow Food Puglia. And we'll be discovering why the president of Slow Food Puglia is here at this meeting, which we're talking about. Ukraine today is September 24th. It's exactly 7 months today that the war started, 24th of February. I remember that morning very well. I woke up and I read the terrible news that no one imagined would ever have happened, because the papers told us that in the long run, probably this wouldn't have happened, that it was just a menace. But regrettably, it's happened, and obviously it's been a shock for us all. But it's also a few hours later that it also was an opportunity for us to think about our network in Ukraine. We are very present in Ukraine, as Marta will be telling us, but immediately our thoughts went to the Ukraine that led to a number of initiatives we'll be telling you about later in today's meeting. We'd like to give you two perspectives on this story. On the one hand, how we developed this campaign and what it consists in terms of the involvement of Slow Food's involvement worldwide, but also in its support to the slow food communities in Ukraine, and therefore materially what the Slow Food Network has done. But on the other hand, we'll also be trying to give you a very up-to-date overview, a very direct overview, because Yulia and Katerina are direct witnesses of the situation, not only of the slow food communities, but also all these small producers, the activists, the cooks, all those involved in good fare and clean food. The Slow Food Network was very dynamic in the Ukraine before the war. This dynamism has seen a slowdown, but it's starting up again. And it's also, as Yulia will be telling us, it's one of the elements that are helping them move forward. But at this point, I'd stop and I'd ask Marta Messa to give us a general overview on opening and tell us something more about how our campaign developed, and give us perhaps some figures and give us some idea of what it means to be a global network, which entails that when the need arises, its voice is heard. Thank you. Thank you. This is, well, it's a very important event, and it's very important for me to have Yulia and the Ukraine delegation here with us at Terra Madre. We're 20 delegates in Ukraine with lots of activities here at Terra Madre, too. And obviously what's happened in Ukraine has been something we were terribly impressed by, and we obviously were directly in touch to try and hear through Kalika how we could offer support and help. And there was already a lot of activity. There were already 12 communities, 19 very active cooks, and a lot of Ark of Taste work had been done with 60 products that had been nominated to the Ark. And so this just to give you some idea of how active the country was. And how to say, the thing that struck us most was the courage of the Ukrainian network. First of all, Yulia's courage, because she coordinated the work. It's also the courage of the country, where many of the producers have decided not to leave the country. They've stayed put because they feel responsible for advancing biodiversity that's so important for us. It's food, but also cultural biodiversity, traditional biodiversity. That's also important for our community and also for the health of the global food system. And so, yes, with Yulia, we imagined we could develop two actions in particular. First of all, to produce the producers who decided very courageously to remain in the Ukraine despite the very difficult situation. They wanted to ready for the harvest and then the sowing season. And so that was the first activity, try and give them very practical support. You'll be telling us more about this. And the second was that of welcoming those who needed to flee from Ukraine, perhaps receive slow food producers in the homes of European producers. Actually, this only happened in 2 cases because of the great courage, all the producers really went back to their homes, to their farms in Ukraine. And so the second arm of what we wanted to offer that also had difficulties because bureaucratically wasn't all that easy. But as I was saying, it only occurred in 2 cases because most of the other producers preferred to return to Ukraine. So we launched this fund gathering campaign. In very little time, it was very successful. In little time, we collected 44,000 euros from 7 different countries in the world. And this shows one what it means to be a network. On the one hand, there was the Ukraine network that was determined, that was courageous and remained on its land. But there was also, on the other hand, the World Slow Food Network that did something to try and make a small gesture to support the Ukraine colleagues. And so the importance of being a network emerged from this campaign. And I think there's another important message here. We're using food as a bridge for peace. That's one important, it's become something of a refrain. It's something we've continued to say, not only because of what's happening in Ukraine, because unfortunately there are many, many conflicts elsewhere in the world. Some of them are invisible, like, for instance, the indigenous populations' struggles. Their livelihoods are also at risk. But food is certainly an instrument of peace, which we see from the situation in Ukraine. And the amazing thing is that this Ukraine war has led to great concern about a global food crisis. But the problem wasn't the war per se. If there was a crisis, it's because there is a food system that's always on the verge of collapsing because it's not sustainable. It's systemically in a situation of peril. It was just precipitated by the war in Ukraine, whereas instead we've seen great resilience on the ground, serving local communities. And so this great strength and resilience is another strong message, also faced with the battle that we've been carrying forward as Slow Food over the last 30 years. Let me close at this point saying a big thank you Thanks also to all those who supported the campaign. I now have to leave because there's another meeting I have to be at, but I'll ask Roberto and Vika to tell me how the meeting goes. And in any way, be courageous and continue as you've been doing so far. Thank you, Martha. And thank you for your testimonial. Obviously, considering your role, it's something you've presented on behalf of all of Slow Food International. So, Julia, it was the 12th of March then we were in touch for the first time, and Julia was already in touch with Vika. She'd been in touch with her for quite some days. She'd already told her about the situation. Vika had already prepared us, but I was feeling rather emotional because I didn't know what you'd be telling me and what I'd be able to tell you. I mean, just imagine you got to have a call with the leader of your network who finds herself in a country under bombs, under the menace of war, and you've got to make the call because you've got to try to be useful somehow or other, and you have no idea how you can be useful. And Julia immediately made it clear to me in just 1 minute. She'd already explained everything that had to be done. She already had everything clear in mind. She'd already heard about all the contact persons in the Ukraine, and she'd practically told me what we were to do. You can do this, you can do that, you can deal with this, you can deal with that. And she made it all much easier for us. And we then tried to do what she was asking us to do. But I must say, she was and is quite extraordinary, so much so that in July this year, when we celebrated the World Congress of Slow Food, the one during which we elected Edi Mukibi as president and Marta Mesa as general secretary, we handed Julia a prize. We awarded her a prize in memory of Ursula Adsson, one of the great leaders of slow food. She was president of Slow Food Germany, part of the international board. She was a very strong, powerful woman. We thought it was another powerful woman who was to take her place in some way. So, Julia, perhaps at this point you can tell us something about these 7 months, and especially during this first part of our meeting, you could tell us something about these 7 months of work with our network and with the aid that we're trying to send you. What have you managed to do? What's been happening? And then perhaps we can broaden our gaze to a more general situation. Thank you, Roberto. Thank you to Martha, too. Even though she's left, I'm delighted to be with you here and to be able to speak to you all and see our friend Marcello Longo. Thank you also to my life that allowed me to meet Katerina Tarasenko. We only met thanks to the campaign. And now to our stand, the Ukraine stand, is the logical continuation of the campaign. We were able to bring our delegates thanks to your support. And I'd also like to invite you all to our stand to see who we are, what products we've brought, and show you that Ukraine is alive, it's resisting, and has wonderful products to offer. But it's true, on February 24th, we had a terrible shock, a total shock. Then another 3-4 days were days of total chaos, because it seemed to us that we were in a sort of film. But in actual fact, we realized it wasn't a film. It was a war. It was a war with bombs, missiles, explosions, people dying, some people you knew who'd been killed. It was really a tragedy, a drama. But nonetheless, one's mind keeps working, structuring things, and you realize that your kids are in a safe place, and you can move on and think about others too. But what's the problem in this transition period between the winter and the spring, between February and March, is a very tough period for farmers, for breeders, goat farmers, shepherds, because it's the time of the year in which they're coming to the end of their stocks, and then they have to buy new food for their animals. And at the beginning of the war, they had no possibility whatsoever to buy straw, or hay, or food. And I was on the phone with everybody, and I realized that we were at a point of no return. If we'd waited another 2, 3, 5, 6 days, we'd be losing our animals, our local breeds that we've protected these last few years. We've found them, we protected them, we've created dissemination, awareness raising, and we started this journey of ours of supporting these breeders, these farmers, and we risked losing them forever. I was a little stressed, but I started this push action. I can remember our first Zoom meetings, our videos. I was crying. They were all our friends from Slow Food International on the Zoom screen, and all of them were crying too. I mean, we've lived some very dramatic times together. However, it was in that period, as always before, I felt I was part of a great family. It was an opportunity for me and for all our people to understand what slow food actually means, what it is. Slow food is a world of solidarity, and it's when you need it that help comes. I don't know how you did it. And together we managed to help many people, many animals, many products. We gave hope, and these 7 months have been really different. We started from total chaos and small initiatives. We sent out a form to fill in for our producers. Yes, we prepared a form in which we were gathering basic information for the producers. Julia had identified, yes, when you're trying to help everyone, you obviously need to do it in a systematic way. If you're a little stressed, obviously you don't understand where the money's going, and we wanted to use the funds that were arriving in the most effective way. So we gave priority to people who had autochthonous local breeds, to those who had greater need in terms of question of death, life or death. We tried to help our researchers, our scientists. I'll show you now the situation they were in. How can I show you the slides? Generally, you start with a thank you, but in this case, we start with a thank you, really heartfelt thanks. So here, this is our page. Perhaps you've all seen it, and if you haven't seen it yet, check it out. Here I've written that it's thanks to the prompt response of the international slow food community to the war in Ukraine that we've been able to save species, breeds, traditions. We've helped people and animals to survive. And we also were able to shorten the distance between farmers and consumers, creating direct sales between them. And since the situation hasn't yet been solved, and sadly the war continues, we realize that it's not over. And so we continue with our resistance, and we try to keep moving on. Here you see a Ukrainian field. Here's the most fertile, the famous Ukrainian soil, but you see here the holes that are the result of the bombing. Sadly, this is our situation, and sadly, that's what it still is. Here, this is Sergei. He's a biology specialist. He works in a genetic bank in the Kharkiv area, and he, in peacetime, he was and still is in charge of sowing that are part of the gene bank. Every year they have to sow and grow and harvest. Yes, it's a sowing season that has the purpose of preserving the natural Ukrainian varieties. This is the situation, however, in which his institute is now. It was bombed in April with a very focused bombing operation. There was nothing military anywhere there. And now he's created a second job for himself. He is a sower. Since these grains that during the summer months were to be harvested, the fields had been mined, and they had to remove the mines and harvest by hand. All the harvesting equipment had been destroyed, and then the tractor drivers, the combine harvester operators, the harvesters, the combine harvesters, the workers were afraid to help in the harvest because they were afraid that they might run over a mine. A number of them were already in hospital because of mines exploding. And in any event, we're very happy because we were able to help this institute of Yuriev's, but also other institutes that deal with oils, vegetation, various types of vegetables. We have a lot of production, agricultural production in the Kharkiv region. This gentleman you see here is delighted because he's a person who lives in a village near Kiev. They were occupied by Russian troops who stole everything. He had poultry. They'd stolen all the poultry, and nothing was left after the Russians had passed through the area. And so what did we do? We brought 4 different breeds of Ukrainian poultry. We also brought incubators to get the poultry production starting again, producing eggs and producing new animals in a way to preserve the breeds that were at risk of extinction, and we'll be going to visit them shortly. This is the hay. It was the big problem we had at the beginning of spring, but now winter is coming again, and we have requests from our slow food friends, those who are still in an occupied area or those who are on the front line, but also those who are in central Ukraine, also in western Ukraine. They all have to prepare for the winter because obviously there are no customers. As we know, slow food products are the ones that have a natural price. It takes a lot of work to produce these products if you're honest and you do things the right way. But if your customers were mothers with children, they've fled. Customers who had money, they've left too. So people who could buy, those who have remained, either they're people who no longer have any money or their wages have been reduced, and they all know that the end isn't in sight and they'll be needing money in the future too. So this food basket has changed. And people are now choosing less expensive products. Our products are all heroic, certainly, but they find themselves having to gift their products because they have a warm heart too, and they want to help people. They want to help people who have to move west, our refugees, yes. They help hospitals, they help civil defense members, because cities, especially Kyiv, defended by the Kyiv population, the men of Kyiv, because the army had other things to do, and it's our husbands who must defend the city. And it's thanks to all our farmers, thanks to our producers around the big cities. They needed to eat, and so we would take warm food to the producers, and the producers would bring us their produce. And that's what happens in wartime. And so we're trying to help all 3 areas now. We're trying to support them by giving them a little money. Yes, there are lots of them, but we try to help everybody a little at least. Perhaps at this point I can hand over. Yes, fine. So we can hand over to Katerina. I just wanted to underscore another point that perhaps isn't all that clear at first sight, or perhaps, yes, it is, and I apologize if I'm saying something that's obvious to you. Why did we say, together with Julia, let's deal with the situation of small producers, small farmers, and especially biodiversity, autochthonous breeds, and the plants, the seeds, the traditional products of Ukraine. First of all, because obviously this is the mission of Slow Food. If we collect funds and we allocate them generically to feeding the population, I mean, this is something that other organizations are already doing. It's important we keep to our own mission. But the second message is that almost no one has done what we've been doing. Nobody's been really helping the small farmers, the local varieties, the local breeds, and the enormous risk was that in just a few months of war, everything would have been lost. So if some of the farmers of the Slow Food Network hadn't had our support, they would have had to allow their animals to die, and those breeds would have disappeared. And rebuilding the animals of the Ukraine would have occurred basing ourselves on intensive farming breeds, and therefore they would have been a degradation of the food variety of the country. And Julia, I mean, this is one of the points that we were a little embarrassed by. I mean, we wondered how can we tell her that we're going to have to defend the autochthonous breeds, but it's she who told us that that's what had to be done, because otherwise we were going to lose part of the heritage, which we know is a limited heritage, because in Italy, too, it's a traditional but very important heritage. So Katerina, with the help of Yulia, who will be translating, because Katerina will speak in Ukrainian, we'll now hear from Katerina.
Дякую за запрошення. Ніколи не думала, що мені доведеться, буде можливість подякувати керівництву Slow Food безпосередньо в Італії, в Туріні, за ту допомогу, яку нам надали, коли нам було дуже-дуже важко.
Vi ringrazio.
I'd like to thank you. I never thought I'd have this opportunity to thank everybody, especially the people at the helm of Slow Food International for the assistance they provided to us.
Початок війни для нас був ще в 2014 році. Я уже одного разу переїжджала зі сходу України на захід України.
Per me la guerra era iniziata
To me, war had begun in 2014 because I lived in the area of Donetsk, where I had to move to the west of Ukraine.
Дійшли до 130 тваринок.
Ho iniziato da una capra e siamo arrivati a 130.
І була дуже розвинута туристична локація.
E le mie
My the place where I used to work, was very well known to tourists and was a tourist destination. So we had started with very little and we had already developed a lot. But now, after February the 24th, now there was a very sharp decline in the number of tourists.
Нам прийшлось знову релокувати на іншу територію, з гір виїхати на рівнину, щоб знайти корма для нашого ще більшого стада.
visto questa situazione
And given the situation, we had to relocate again from the mountains to an area that was in the valleys where there's more food. There was more food for our animals, and we all hoped that there would be a better opportunity to resist.
Була земля, але погодні умови в цьому році, наприклад, не дозволили нам достатньо заготувати корма для наших тваринок.
ci siamo
So we found ourselves in another rather difficult situation because also the place that we moved to wasn't ready to accommodate us, and the winter was pretty cold, and also the beginning, early spring, was very chilly, and we didn't have an opportunity to find a place for our animals.
України, і ті, хто на окупованій території, і ті, хто в спокійних зонах, територіях України, але кожен з нас допомагає переселенцям, військовим. Буквально кожен фермер відправляє продукти харчування або бійцям, або тим людям, які потребують в Україні допомоги на сьогодні.
È vero che noi tutti i produttori siamo molto
And it is a fact that all the producers are very united now, those who live in central and western Ukraine, as well as those who live in the occupied areas. We all work hard for our communities. And also, we are working hard to send our products free of charge, of course, to hospitals, the army, and anyone who needs food.
Завдання і розвивати, утримувати фермерські господарства і допомагати іншим людям. Але це на сьогодні дуже важко, бо наша держава не може дотувати фермерське господарство на сьогоднішній
Visto
день.
che lo Stato non fa donazione
And given that the government is not making donations to the sector, they are not really assisting not just agriculture, but the refugees.
70
nel
людей.
nel suo locale ci sono 60
These people are coming to see us, looking for accommodation. We have 60 now in our place.
22 дитини, молодший 5 місяців.
di cui 22 sono bambini.
And 22 out of these 60 are children. There's a 5-month-old little girl and a baby girl, and there are lots of people that live on the farm, and they don't have an opportunity to work, and the elderly with the children are also there.
I giovani hanno
Такі
trovato
люди не
lavoro,
можуть.
lavoro, sì, loro
The young people who we accommodate did find a job, but these people still need a lot of help.
da noi
Шорти,
arriva, da noi
шльопанці і
arriva la
футболка.
gente da
Now we receive people from eastern Ukraine who are just carrying a small bag with their documents, their papers. They only have their IDs. They only have very few moments to escape when the army comes, and so they have to leave everything as is. And also their homes, in most cases, have been bombed already, bombarded, and so they don't have a place to stay.
І господарства, і
Perciò
наших
adesso abbiamo questi
прихистків.
due problemi che dobbiamo risolvere.
So now we have two problems. On the one hand, we needed to resist. We needed to go on, keep doing what we've been doing all the time, and also help these people now.
У кожного, буквально у кожного з нас стаються трагедії. Буквально, коли я відкривала стенд, я отримала повідомлення, що загинув мій близький друг. Це було позавчора.
Altri ieri
The day before yesterday, a dear friend of hers died at war. He was part of the army. And now his son is fighting. He's been mobilized as a member of the army since last March. And so we need your help.
Наші господарства, щоб перемогти нашого ворога, щоб відбудувати нашу країну. Просто зараз нам дуже важко.
sono sicura
Дякую.
che sono sicura
I am pretty sure that we're going to prevail at last. But one day we'll be able to reconstruct, to rebuild our country. But today the situation is really difficult, very serious, and we need help. Thank you.
Grazie Caterina per
Thank you, Katerina, for bearing witness to the facts and also for accepting our invitation to come to Turin to participate in Terra Madre and therefore to become finally part of this network of ours where we hope we can provide help even when the emergency is over and when we have an opportunity to rebuild. You have an opportunity to rebuild your country. Marcello is one of the representatives of the over 300 donors that this campaign has gathered from all over the world. Now, Marta was saying this. We often organize campaigns. In a few days from now, we're going to work to assist the producers, the restaurateurs, and the other people who have businesses in the Marques, the central Italian region that was flooded last week. We have friends, we have eateries and producers whose businesses were totally destroyed. Now, the Ukrainian mobilization was very exceptional, however. So it went beyond our expectations because this war that comes to Europe and the fact of knowing that we have our brothers and sisters from the Slow Food Network being affected by this war is a very special fact. So how did you mobilize? How did you make sense of what was happening? Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank you all, and I would like to thank Julia, because we immediately got along. My mother used to say that if you saw wind,
Certo, non mi immaginavo.
you harvest storms. And so if you start a war, you have to pay the consequences of it. And a war close to us requires us to take instead positive action. And despite everything, we in Apulia have always been very close to every single slow food campaign because we feel a community just like many others around the world. And so we can't we can't do anything that wouldn't work for our communities. So we, in Apulia, we thought immediately of taking action, and we won't stop here. We're not happy with what we've done so far. We want to go on because I do think this war is bringing about lots of huge problems, be it an energy crisis. Think of what would happen if we could no longer brush our teeth, do the regular things that we were doing every single day. So we thought of Ukraine very dearly. We thought of their situation, the fact of having a house, a home that you have to leave overnight. And we thought that it could be the same with us. So what if it happened to me, we thought. Now, here we are at Terra Madre with a big stand, a big booth that was sponsored by the Apulian region. We are asking for some money to take care of emergencies. Now, in Apulia, we were contributors and adopters of 50 of the vegetable gardens that were built that were plowed and created in Africa. And we're going to do a lot more. There will be an effort to also help people in the Marques because we realize that these negative situations, the negative circumstances, we would like not to be exposed to them. And so we help others who are suffering from them. I think that each and every one of us has a moral obligation to stand by our brothers and sisters who are suffering and who have to face huge problems. I'd like to thank Slow Food for giving me this opportunity. I'm a slow food man in every respect, and so long as I live and so long as I'm slow food activist, I'll keep providing my contribution, because this is what slow food stands for: a big family that is not abandoning the people who belong to our communities around the world. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Marcello, because the spirit you have conveyed is the right spirit, the true spirit of slow food. We still have 10 minutes before the next conference. And so before when we will have to leave this room to others. But while we're still here, okay, first of all, let me mention this. Tomorrow at 4 p.m. at the stand of the University of Gastronomic Science, there will be a presentation of the work done by the Slow Food Network in the Ukraine with the university. This activity has consisted in categorizing and writing a list of the products of the ARC in the Ukrainian territory. So if you want to learn more about this situation, please join us at the stand, at the booth. Now, before the war, the country was very dynamic. The new cuisine of Ukraine was very lively, effervescent. We were talking about chefs in Kyiv, Ukrainian chefs, and we were working on many fronts. So we would like to use the last 10 minutes, Julia, to tell the people here about this activity that has come to a standstill. What was it about? What are the prospects that you see? Andrea Pieroni, who will attend this conference, a professor of the university, when he talks about the Ukraine, he is saying very fascinating things. Now, if whenever it will become possible, we'll visit Ukraine to get to know your products. But while this is still not possible, please paint us a picture of the potential of this country, which is now opening up to Europe with its gastronomy as well. Thank you very much, Roberto. I'd like to thank Andrea Pieroni, who's a big fan of Ukraine. It is true, Ukraine has an immense potential, and it is a potential that we're still in the process of discovering, just like many other countries. But it's like life. It's like some sort of binomial. Wherever you have a negative, you have a positive. This situation has helped us becoming more united and to show our energy. So we're going to move on with our new projects, not just the Arc of Taste. Before the war, 80 to 90 new products had been added to the list. So we're ready to provide more, to contribute more to that list. We have another 10 to 15 products ready to become part of the list. Another 10 communities are just waiting for the last formal steps before they become members of Terra Madre. We have a project around rye, because everybody says, keeps saying that Ukraine is facing, as everybody knows, there's a wheat crisis, a grains crisis. Most of it is wheat, sunflower seeds, and corn and maize. This is exactly what Marta was talking about. This is not anything new. The crisis was ready. We only had to trigger it. So we're going to move on with this brand new project around rye, because our local grains, are different because they are very resistant. They don't need as many pesticides. It's just like local breeds, animal breeds. And it's an excellent product too. To us, it's very important that together with the press and together with all the members of the Slow Food Ukraine organization, we can move on with this activity of raising awareness at the highest levels. Now, we do believe that all our projects are doable. Thank you. Oh, thank you. And I would like you all in half an hour at 5 o'clock to join us at the Regeneration Hall, where Zakarpati will make a wonderful sweet for us, a wonderful bakery product for us. So if I think that war is death and destruction, if we want to defeat this culture of death and destruction, the culture of war, then the best way to do that is to fuel life, is to feed life. And what better to feed life than growing food, taking good care of our animals, taking good care of nature that feeds us. So it shouldn't sound strange that we devote so many thoughts, so much energy to continuing our investigations with the Ark of Taste in the Ukraine when the fields have been bombarded or are teeming with landmines, because that's the picture of the emergency, of the immediate danger. But the culture of war is defeated if you grow the food which stands for life. And hence we want precisely to do that in line with our philosophy, because we are convinced that whether during a war or at peace, now is the best time to create our future. So it makes even more sense, actually, to defend biodiversity in the Ukraine than in Italy at the moment, because we need that. Of course, we do need that in Italy, but it is evident to everyone that they need it more badly. Now, as Marcello pointed out, let's continue our work, but part of the work we do should be done for them. And another principle that Slow Food maintains is that of fairness. There's no fairness if in the near future we find ourselves where part of our Europe, not the political Europe, but the geographical and cultural Europe is lagging behind because of a war. So if we can help them regain the ground they will have lost, that will benefit everybody. And that is the meaning of everything we're doing here, and that we will continue doing. So we're very proud of the Ukraine, and we thank our Yulia. Let me finish with a final statement. In these difficult times, I have lived on my dreams. And so these dreams have kept me alive. And I thought of the Black Sea and the beauty of our land. And please come and visit, look at the sky, to look at the sky of the Ukraine, a starry sky. These dreams help us a lot. That's why we're so strong, so resilient. Thank you, everyone, for helping us.
Allora, grazie a tutti e andate.
Now, thank you, everyone. Please do visit the stand of the Ukraine, that of Apulia, and all the other activities at the Parco d'Ora. Thank you very much.